Hello, this is your host, Belle Chavey speaking. Welcome to today's episode of the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing's podcast, WellCAT 101. The purpose of this podcast is to give students an opportunity to share their college experiences, their advice, or interesting anecdotes for listeners who are students, staff, parents, etc. Each episode topic will be related to student well-being and or mental health through the lens of positivity and growth. We hope you enjoy this episode of WellCAT 101. Hey guys, this is your host, Belle Chavey, welcoming you to the second episode of our podcast, WellCAT 101. We have some super awesome guests here today. So to get us started, I will introduce them. Here with me today is Luke Matulewicz, the Assistant Director of the Academic Achievement Center here at K-State, and student tutor Kailee Irvin, who I would like to extend a congratulations to for being awarded the Kim Dirks Tutor of Distinction. Luke, would you like to give a brief introduction to yourself before we get too far into things?
Yeah, so I'm Luke Matulewicz, the Assistant Director of the Academic Achievement Center. I've been here at K-State this is my fifth spring, so really excited about that. The Academic Achievement Center is a great resource for all students, free tutoring, academic coaching, and success tools, and I'm sure we'll talk about kind of all those services and more here in this episode.
Absolutely. And Kailee, would you like to do the same? You can give us a brief introduction, just talk about what you're studying, who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Kailee. I'm a sophomore here at K-State, and I'm animal science pre-vet. I've been with the Academic Achievement Center. This is my third semester as a tutor now, and I'm both a success skills tutor, or study skills tutor now, and content tutor.
Awesome. Before we get into anything too deep, I want to start with what we start every episode with, which is a silly intro question. So this episode's intro question actually needs a little bit of explanation. So this is a totally real, not made up scenario that I looked up on the internet. So Oreos emailed me, the company, and they wanted to know my opinion about what would make the worst flavor of Oreo cookie. They're wanting to do like a reverse psychology thing with their marketing, and they want to know what the worst flavor of Oreo cookie is. And they're asking for my opinion. I don't know why. So I was racking my brain, and I was like, what? I don't know what flavor to use. And I thought, why don't I just ask it on the podcast? So each of you, maybe ponder it for a moment. What do you think the worst Oreo flavor would be if they made a terrible Oreo? I think that I love pickles, but a pickle flavored Oreo sounds horrendous. Kind of like they make ranch flavored ice cream, and I love ranch, but my family made me try the ranch flavored ice cream, and it was horrendous. So I'm wondering if there are like things that are maybe a little bit more sour or more savory that would not work well with something that you would think is sweet. Like, I don't know, maybe would a pizza Oreo go over very well? I don't know.
You know, being from Chicago, we put a lot of things on our pizza, but an Oreo, I don't know if I would agree with that or not. The worst flavor may be the Chicago hot dog Oreo, though. That'd be intense.
Hot dog Oreo. Yeah. Would there be like condiments in the Oreo filling? Do you think?
I think there would have to be, and instead of dipping it in milk, you'd have to dip it in water.
Yeah. Hot dog water.
Yeah. We shouldn't have gone there, but there we did.
But it's okay. No.
I'd have to say like chicken broth or like meat flavored Oreo. Like, going back to the pizza, like pepperoni would not be good.
That would not be good.
Mm-mm.
I got a bacon candle as a gift one year. Horrible. Like, you don't want your house smelling like bacon unless you get to eat bacon. So
that's true.
Yeah, the Oreo, like, if it tasted like meat, like, it would just be disappointment.
I agree. I think the bacon candle would just make me hungry.
Yeah.
But, okay, well, I will email Oreos back and let them know that we've found a solution to their problem. And I think they will be very excited to know that we've answered their questions. So look out for the new hot dog flavored Oreo, chicken broth Oreo coming to you soon. So now I want to transition over to today's episode topic, overcoming like academic inhibitors like stress and procrastination. It's something that like I think every student experiences at some point or another, unless, you're a person who's like super chill and has never been stressed ever in your life, which I don't know anyone like that, but if any of you listening are like that, I'm jealous, because it's a difficult thing that I have had a long history with. And I wanted to bring on some guests to talk about it. So the inspiration from this episode is actually the National College Health Assessment Summary for K-State in 2024 listed that the top 3 things that inhibit academic performance, which number 1 was, you guessed it, procrastination, number 2 was stress, and number 3 was anxiety. And those things are they're really big and broad subjects that are different. People experience them differently, and it's hard to find solutions for them because I don't think there is a 100% end-all solution for procrastination or stress or anxiety. There's only, tips to deal with it, ways to cope, and different things that you can try, and a lot of it is trial and error. I know that there's a lot of study tips and stress management mechanisms that I have tried out that just don't work for me, that other people swear by and it really works for them. So I think it's really helpful to share tips and tricks because you don't know who it will resonate with. And maybe, I love looking up new ways to combat academic inhibitors and things like stress and anxiety because maybe if it doesn't resonate with me, it resonates with other people. So it's a good idea to have a very broad insight into these kinds of things. So what I want to open the floor and say, ask the question, what is your experience with academic stress? And either of you can go first, or I can talk about my experience with academic stress, but I just wanted to kind of put it out there of like, what kind of experience do you have with that?
I guess I kind of have 2 perspectives on it. As a student, I just have experience as an animal science pre-vet student, the experience of having multiple exams to prepare for, a lot of maybe assignments due the same week, and just kind of how to manage that. And in college, that's definitely one of the bigger adjustments moving from high school into college is a lot of it falls on you. You have I felt like I had fewer reminders coming from professors, whereas in high school, your teachers are kind of there keeping you more on track. And then on a tutor side of things, I definitely have had students who come in who maybe are super prepared for the exam, but have a little bit more anxiety going into it because they don't know what to expect and they feel more stressed even though that they understand what the content at least. So they kind of have more anxiety and stress just because of the unknown and not so much because of the content.
100%. I agree. I know that as a freshman, at my high school, at least, the teachers were very helpful in my high school classes about giving us like exact study guides of questions that will appear on the test. And so a lot of it was just kind of memorization of a study guide, or there was always a day in class where we would review for an exam. And in college, you really don't have that. I mean, sometimes you have, professors that are really lenient about that, and they do have review days for exams, but I know in a lot of my classes, the reminders about exams are few and far between, and a lot of the time, you're just expected to, memorize the syllabus and know when to prepare those things completely on your own, which is definitely a learning curve for me and a lot of other people that I've talked to as well.
Yeah, I think that's like spot on. The difference between the high school experience and the college totally flips the game on who's responsible for A, the learning, but then B, the knowing when you need to know things. I have a reoccurring dream, even if I'm not taking a class for my PhD, that I've forgotten to do my online class for like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I'm like, crap, I haven't done this class, and I wake up, I'm like, I'm not enrolled, like I'm not a student anymore, but somehow that is still a constant dream I have every couple of weeks. It's reoccurring stress, and so I think it goes to those pieces of knowing what you're walking into and being prepared.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned online classes. I feel like with online classes being not a super new thing, but new for me coming into college, is in high school I took maybe 1 or 2 online classes through the community college that was near my hometown. But I took a couple of online classes last semester, and those, I mean, it is 100% up to you to do those things. And I found that it was really difficult to find the motivation to get home from classes and then have to do my own class on on the computer when I come home. And for some people, that is really convenient because maybe they have a work schedule that's difficult to work around with in-person classes, or they like to do classes in big chunks, like over a weekend or something. But I found that I learn much better by doing increments of class like every other day. And so it was hard to set a schedule for myself that I would rigorously follow. At the beginning of the semester, when I had a lot of motivation, I would be really motivated to, do that online classwork and keep with it. But then as the semester goes on, maybe I was like, oh, I can skip the online class stuff today and then I'll do it tomorrow. And it's like, if I didn't have time to do it today, how will I have time to do it tomorrow, And so that's definitely something that I've also had to learn how to navigate is online classes that are added into the mix. So yeah, it's really interesting. Is there I don't know, have you found any sort of way to, I've heard people do assignment trackers, or obviously I live by Google Calendar. I have a color coordinated Google Calendar. If it's not in the Google Calendar, it's not happening, because I've tried actual physical planners and they just don't work for me. So what kind of methods do you use to keep track of assignments and classes or appointments and a job? What are some tips or tricks that you guys might have?
For me, I kind of use a combination of everything. So I don't have a paper planner. I have one kind of on my iPad that fills the same thing. And every week I kind of map out my whole week going into it. Which includes appointments for tutoring, classes, that kind of thing. And as crazy as it sounds, I schedule my free time so that I don't always stick to that, but so that I have some time that's just for me, and then I have time that I'm studying. And I also, at the start of each semester, make a spreadsheet by going through all of the course materials that are posted, that literally I put in all due dates, all exam dates, everything, so that my entire semester, I know when I'm turning things in, when I'm turning in, and I also keep track of where. So sometimes professors still ask for paper assignments, so keeping track of if it's a paper assignment, if I'm submitting it on Canvas or another website. I try to do that as early as I can in the semester.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I live by my Outlook calendar. If it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would be or what day it was. And then I also in college got into bullet journaling as a way of tracking what was going on, what I needed to do, what I had done. And so kind of my work notebook is similar to that, but doesn't follow all of the requirements of quote unquote bullet journaling. But yeah, no, what I loved about what you shared is that it's the structuring of time, right? I think we often get lost when we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And so I know academic coaches, I know study skills tutors, when it comes to a first year student and all of a sudden you only have 3 hours of class on a Tuesday now, well, what do we do with those other times? And if you're in an online class, okay, let's treat that like a real class, right? Let's schedule some time, schedule a location to build those habits, because if we don't have those habits and we don't have those things in place, all of a sudden you've spent 5 hours doing whatever and you don't know where that time went.
Absolutely. And that discipline is really difficult. Those habits are for some easy to build, but I know for me, some of them were easier than others. I know that having a different, say on Mondays I have a 9:30, but on Tuesdays I don't have class until 11:30 or 12:30. That morning time, I could be spent sleeping in, which sometimes is the answer. If I was up late studying on Monday, then sleeping in would probably be a good idea. But I I think a better use of my time would be not sleeping in every single Tuesday and Thursday. Maybe the time is better spent still waking up at the same time and doing classwork or spending time on a hobby or structuring that time so that I'm not always sleeping in. You don't always, sometimes you need that time to sleep in or rest or take a nap or whatever. But yeah, structuring your time helps you build routine, which is something that really helps with stress and anxiety, because in college, your routine changes every single semester and kind of alternates every single day. Like in high school, every day, 5 days a week, it starts at the same time, ends at the same time. And if you were involved in an extracurricular, starts at the same time, ends at the same time every day. And so even though, you get to Monday and you're like, man, I wish I didn't have to wake up at 7:30 every Monday, that structure and that schedule actually is a little bit more beneficial to you because your body is used to waking up at that same time. Whereas in college, if you wake up at different times on a Monday and a Tuesday, it can sometimes set yourself out of whack because you're not used to that. So I really liked what you said about structuring your time. I wanted to kind of talk about procrastination a little bit because this is the ever-present problem for, I think, every single person. Sometimes I've met people who procrastinate a lot with schoolwork. I've met people who don't procrastinate with schoolwork, but procrastinate a lot about different things. Like maybe if it's the evening time and they're all done with their homework, they procrastinate going to bed by scrolling on their phone. Or maybe they procrastinate things like dishes or sweeping or chores. And so I was wondering if you guys have any tips that have helped you with procrastination, or if not, we can just talk about how tough it is because, oh my goodness, sometimes something that takes 15 minutes will take me 3 hours to get the motivation to do.
Yeah, my favorite definition of procrastination or kind of example came from a TED Talk, and it's the procrastination monkey, right? It shows up in the time of, oh crap, this is due, now I need to do it, and you panic and you get it done. And so that monkey of chaos. And so what I have found about procrastination is setting deadlines, right? No matter how arbitrary they might be, or how fake they are, setting that deadline then usually triggers that monkey to come out and say, oh, we have to do this work, we have to get this done. I like how you mentioned like sweeping the floor, because there's nothing that makes you clean faster than knowing someone's coming over, and that makes cleaning so much faster and so much easier. And so if it's inviting people over, right, so that you clean your dorm, or if it's saying I have to get my homework done by Friday so I can go to the basketball game, whatever those deadlines are that you set for yourself, it can often help you trigger those feelings and getting that rush of, oh, I need to do this now, but in a much healthy manner versus my paper's due at 11:59 and it's 11:30.
Yeah, I think getting started is often the hardest part. Something I've had is just like when I feel like I have so much to do and not knowing where to start, it kind of makes me kind of be like, oh, well, I'll do this instead. Or like my roommate is a productive cleaner or procrastinator. She'll clean instead of doing work because it's still productive, so it still feels like you're getting something done. And something I'll do to kind of combat that is figure out what's the shortest task that I have to do, or I'll organize the tasks by how long they're going to take me. And then I'll do some of the quicker tasks first and have a to-do list, because I personally love checking things off a to-do list. So that way I can kind of get momentum and get started and check off those quicker tasks and feel like I've been more productive in a shorter time.
Absolutely. I'm a list girly. So I love making a long list, and checking things off does help me build momentum for, to do the harder things at the end. I often also do this thing where I'll put tasks that I've already done on my to-do list just so that I can.
List is a to-do list item. Right?
Yes, literally. And so then I can just cross that off. And it's helpful for me. Other people have been like, that's kind of pointless. But it's helpful for me to see like physically, because a lot of the time I think I make up in my head that I have way more things to do than I actually do. Like if I know at the beginning of the week, if I make a list of all of my homework that I have to do for the week, it's so helpful to have a physical visual reference for how much I have to do rather than sitting on a Monday and going, oh my gosh, I have so much homework that's due by the end of this week. I have a paper, all those things. So I love the list option. I also know that sometimes the quicker tasks are good to do first, but what works for other people that I've talked to, quicker tasks, doing them first usually works for me, but for some of my friends, they say doing the hardest tasks or the things that take the longest first also is helpful, because then you're not dreading this thing at the end. And so after you're done doing the hardest thing, those easy tasks seem so much easier and quicker because you have already done the thing that you're kind of dreading doing. Like say if you have, if you need to do the dishes, if you need to send an email and you need to write a paper, if you do the paper first, that email can be done in 5 minutes, that those dishes can get done in 15. So that's also a good tip that I have heard. Another thing that I like to do when I don't know where to start, it sounds a little bit silly, but if you've ever maybe even in high school, but in elementary school, when your teachers would make those like look up on a website, like randomizer wheel. And so there's like a little like wheel that you can spin with like names when they were picking people for things. I'll look up like randomizer rainbow wheel on my laptop, and I'll put in the names of my assignments on the randomizer wheel. So if I don't have a list, if everything is kind of due at the same time, like by the end of the week, it's hard for me to arrange it by due date because everything's due at the end of the week. If I don't know where to start, I just click on that randomizer wheel and it'll pick an assignment for me that I can get started on. So if you have something that's all kind of due at the same time and will relatively take the same amount of time, like obviously the randomizer wheel really doesn't work if you have a paper due and like a 5-question assignment, because then if it picks the 5-question assignment over the paper, you probably should get started on the paper if they're both due at the same time. But if you have things that will all kind of take the same amount of time, and that's not just for assignments, but for chores as well, if they'll all take the same amount of time, that works for me, is that it alleviates me from having to make the decision and having a randomizer make the decision for me.
And I think with any of those, it's physics, right? Emotion at rest stays at rest, and emotion that's in motion stays in motion. And so no matter which way you find yourself being able to start something, you'll usually then be able to continue. And so, if it's okay, I'm going to do the dishes, then, okay, I feel energy, I'm going to sweep the floor, and then I'm going to take the trash out, right? All of a sudden, all those things are much easier to do because you've already been doing them. I know I'm sometimes guilty of like, I want to take a break, right? And then all of a sudden that break turns into 2 hours, and it's like, where did the time go? And so sometimes it's persevering through it. The other thing I'll say is I think a big stressor I know I felt in college and grad school was papers. And I think what we've lost is the idea of like actually just brainstorming, right? And doing an outline and doing a rough draft. The thing that you type for the first time does not need to be perfect. Oftentimes just writing ideas and throwing out concepts and what would I want to say can often make then the actual writing process easier. I think we walk into it thinking what I put on paper for the first time or type into my laptop for the first time has to be perfect. And that's just not realistic. Like just go in and start babbling, even if it's text to speech, right? Often I think we're easier to think out loud than we are to actually type. And so doing whatever it is and then going in and refining and editing, that's a totally good use of time. And again, I think unfortunately we've lost some of that over the years of feeling okay in writing a rough draft. But it helped me get through grad school, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. I'm definitely guilty of the mindset of like trying to get things done in one sitting. Like if I sit down to do something, I'm very tempted to finish it in the same amount of time that I sat down to do it. And for college, that's really not feasible sometimes. Like, I'm not going to be able to sit down and write a paper in one sitting. And so then it can kind of feel, at least for me, unproductive if I've sat down and I've started a paper and maybe I get the intro paragraph done. I don't really feel like I've accomplished anything because I can't check that paper off of my to-do list. However, it's so important for papers especially, to do them in small chunks because, it usually takes me a really long time to write papers, and it's not feasible for me to sit down for 5 hours to try and crank out a paper. Obviously, if you've procrastinated enough to where it's due at 11:59, sometimes you don't really have a choice. But if you can prevent that and have, like scheduled, structured time, like, okay, today I'm going to do the outline, and tomorrow I'm going to do the intro paragraph. Tomorrow I'm going to do the, first body paragraph. It can make it so much more, you haven't bitten off more than you can chew. The only way to eat an elephant is one bite at the time. So the best way for big things like that can be just breaking them down, like you said, into writing the outline or just writing the intro paragraph, and not expecting it to be perfect when you write it down. It doesn't have to be what you turn in, but you can't edit a blank document. I like that.
Yeah.
And that can also be kind of applied to studying. I want to ask, what are your study tips, tricks, methods? Kailee, you seem like you do quite a bit of studying with your major. So what are your strategies that you have found work for you?
One thing I've really been trying to stay on top of this semester is going through my lectures the day I get the new content, meaning I take notes directly on the PowerPoints that fortunately my professors all post ahead of time. And so going through that and combining both what I wrote down in class and also then what they have on the slides onto one page of paper so that it's all in one place, and so that I'm also processing the information a second time. So that way I kind of have my notes going into when I'm eventually preparing for the exams, since a lot of the times exams cover a lot of content, and it can be very overwhelming to then be like, oh, it's been 5 weeks since I looked at this PowerPoint, but that way I have a summary on one piece of paper, and then I start going through that I love when professors give us objectives of like, here's what I want you to get out of this lecture. And even if they don't, going through and trying to write questions of what they could ask you. So like, some of them are very basic, like, how do you define this? Or what does this phrase mean? And as you kind of get more comfortable with the material, trying to get to those higher level of more application-based questions. So it kind of looks different for each class, but things like, if this goes wrong, what happens for different pathways in like a science class, or that kind of thing. And just kind of trying to become the professor in a way, or trying to teach it to yourself in a different way is kind of the way I approach studying when I can, especially when it does cover a lot of content.
Kailee, you hit on a great point, and we talk about this in tutoring. One of the best ways to learn content is to teach it. And so plenty of our times, our tutoring sessions aren't the tutor-led, they're student-led, and it's the student teaching their tutor the information. There's that quote, right, of like, to teach us to learn. And I truly think that I've taught college freshmen, I learn more sometimes than I think I teach them. And that is so critical. And the points of making sure that we're going beyond just flashcards and beyond just memorization, which is often what we had to do in high school, is what I think makes the difference between the college studying and the high school studying. If all you're ever doing is looking at flashcards and you're not trying to connect concepts or understand the bigger picture, you're probably going to not find yourself being super successful. But if we move past that and start using questions, right, there's plenty of resources out there math has a whole test bank of previous asked questions. You could even use AI to ask you questions, right? Hey, I'm studying for whatever content, right? Can you help me write some practice problems? Those are all super good resources to use.
Absolutely. I totally agree with the, teaching it to yourself or teaching it to another person. For me, when I study, I like to do the thing of like trying to teach it back to myself, or I like to try and explain it to another person without using my notes, without using what I've written down. Can I explain a concept to another person in a way that they kind of understand? I know with STEM classes, a lot of the time there's terminology that you really, really need to understand and know. But like if you can teach it to another person in a concept in a way that they can understand, typically you can find out what you don't know. Because if this other person is confused, say you're explaining I don't know, nuclear fission to your roommate, and your roommate is like, I kind of understand this, but how does this happen? And you're like, oh, I actually don't know how to explain this to you. It's really good to pinpoint that you don't know that. And so then you should focus on studying that rather than the entire concept itself, because that's very overwhelming. But I really liked that you brought that up of like at tutoring, a lot of the time it's more student-led, which is a little bit more productive. When you have a test coming up, it can seem very daunting and cause that stress and anxiety, and it can cause your mind to go blank when you need it to really work. But knowing the content thoroughly can build that confidence, and then that test anxiety really doesn't creep in, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about next is exams. And so we've talked about study tips and studying for your exams, but when you actually get into that exam room, there's a lot of different things going on, and there's a lot of different things that could have happened. Maybe you were running late that morning, and so you got into the testing room right as it's starting. Maybe you had a late night and you are tired and the test is at 7:30 in the morning. Maybe it's finals or midterms and it's your fourth test that week. How do you walk in feeling confident and ready to be successful when you're under a lot of pressure?
I think the best piece of advice I've ever gotten was to control the controllable. Like, there's only so much that you have control over going into an exam. You can't control what questions the professor is going to ask. You can't control the temperature of the room you're in. You can't control if there's really bad traffic when you're driving there and that makes you maybe a few minutes later than you wanted. What you can control is how you respond to these things, and it's really hard in the moment when you're stressing over an exam, but trying to just trust yourself and trust the work that you have put into the class is probably the most difficult thing, but also the best thing you can do for yourself. And to also remind yourself that you're going to make mistakes and you don't have to be perfect, especially on exams. Like, whatever your goal is for the class, as long as you do the work, I truly believe that students get what they want out of the class.
Yeah, I like that saying a lot of like control the things you can, and then make sure you prep, right? And there are some people who will study up until the minute the exam is handed to them. That was not me as a student, right? I wanted the hour before my exam to be me just chilling out, right? I wanted to listen to music, not really worry. I never felt that the thing I was going to look at 2 minutes before the test started was going to actually stick in my brain or be the thing I needed to look at. Instead, it's take a week, right? Don't study the night before. Take a whole week. Find out what you need to study. Break that into pieces. Focus on the things you really don't know. Use your resources, right? If you have a practice exam, if you have a study guide, going over just the objectives of the chapters, right? Oftentimes we feel stressed and anxious because we haven't done the work to be prepared for it. The jitters of the day you walk in, right? That's always going to happen, and you learn to not feel that way by doing it more, right? That's really the only way I've ever found those go away. And then also making sure that when you study, right, that you study in the environment that you're going to take a test. There's some really good science out there that says if you can chew gum when you study, you should chew gum when you take a test. And if you can listen to music when you take your test, listen to music when you study, because our brain wires things in a really strange way. I don't know if the research goes as far as to say go study in the same room you take your exam in, but the whole idea of if I'm going to study and I'm chewing gum and then I go to the exam and I can't chew gum, I've kind of made my brain not wired in the way it should be to then stay in that exam space.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think that when right before an exam, when I am, sitting outside the exam room, I have a lot of anxiety. I think to myself, there's not going to be anything that is totally, there's nothing that I'm going to learn in that moment that's going to help me in the test. So if I'm thinking about looking over new content when I'm right outside the exam room, it's really not going to be helpful to me. And so what I like to do is just kind of sit there. I go over the notes that I want to go over. I think about the topics in a very general way, and I try to build confidence that way of like, I understand the material. I know what I need to know. I'm going into the exam as prepared as I can be at this moment, because there's nothing that I can learn in this hour right before the test happens that's going to change my test result. And so being okay with that and making peace with, I know what I know, it's in my brain somewhere. All I need to do is relay the information, and remembering that a grade doesn't define me. However I feel after this test, is usually dependent on how I feel I did, but I don't want it to affect me for the rest of the day. I love the feeling of getting an exam done, and instead of trying to think about, oh, did I get this question wrong? Did I do this? Did I do that? Just going, it's out of my hands now. It's done. I don't have to worry about it anymore is something I've had to train my brain to do, but it's a really good way that I've learned how to enjoy when the exam is done and not sit there and worry about it until the professor grades the exam. So
one of the other important parts to mention here is that exams, if all we ever do is look at the grade we get and then throw that away, we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? Many of our classes are cumulative finals, so we have to know the content from the beginning to the end, or midterms to the end, whatever that situation might be. And so if we take this exam and we get a 70 on it and we don't look at what we missed, what we don't understand, we're setting ourselves up not to be successful in that following exam. So taking the time to sit down, look at the mistakes. Were they actual content mistakes? Did I not study that content? Or was it I rushed through it, right? It's true and false and I circled A, right? Like, are we making silly mistakes because we were rushing or we just thought we knew it all? Or are we actually making content mistakes, and then can we then make sure to study better next time? Or is it the instructor writes some silly questions, right? Or the way they write questions takes a couple of more minutes to process, and so then we can use that experience to help us the next time we go and take that test.
Absolutely. I think that is so helpful. You guys have such good tips. I'm so excited. And so now I want to give an opportunity to talk about tutoring and the Academic Achievement Center. Just to give kind of a highlight to that, because it's a really cool and really great resource here on K-State's campus, because a lot of it's a total culture shock for a lot of people when they come to college. No matter who you are as a person, it's definitely a life shift and a perspective shift. And I know a lot of high school students who come to college who were, really had no problem studying in high school and didn't really struggle with understanding concepts in high school classes, come to college and they're doing really rigorous courses and really rigorous coursework. And sometimes, you take a lot of different kinds of classes in college, and, half of them probably don't have to do with the major that you're studying. And so no matter what classes you take, there's bound to be a subject that you don't understand or just doesn't click for you. And those students may have never needed to reach out for tutoring help before, but maybe they are a mechanical engineering major that has to take a geology lab or a fine arts course that they're just not, it's totally not familiar to them, and they need help with that. I know I didn't take any language classes in high school, and so coming into, I'm getting a Bachelor of Arts, you're required to have language courses, and I am just not, I was like, this is totally out of my element. And I went to the KLC in the library, the language center, and I was like, I need tutoring help. And it's the first time that I've ever had to go to tutoring. And it was a little bit intimidating at first, but it was super helpful. So I kind of just want to talk about the stigma around tutoring. It can be a little daunting, especially for people who've never had to go to tutoring before, and kind of talk about the tutoring in general.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I learned when I came on staff is we kind of market or advertise tutoring also as just your best study buddy on campus. Because if a tutor is tutoring a course, that means they took it here at K-State, meaning they might not have had the same professor, but they really do understand the concepts and they had to prepare for the exams that you're currently preparing for. So I think one thing with the stigma is it's not necessarily that you're struggling in the course. Sometimes it is, and that's a great time to come to tutoring. Please come to tutoring. But it also can just be, I don't know how I want to prepare for this exam. Why don't I talk to somebody who was successful in the course so that they can help me through this process of preparing for the exam?
Yeah, and I think it's human nature to A, be afraid to ask for help, but then at B, it's the only thing I think us humans have in common is that we all need help, right? This doesn't change once you become a professional, right? My boss came into my office this morning just to chat about some ideas that were floating in her head. It's that the whole process of talking out loud to someone else, sharing ideas, sharing just, what is going on and helping to realize that, right? Having someone be a sounding board for you is really what all tutoring is about. And so I remember in college having to write a philosophy paper, and I had no idea even where to start. So I went to tutoring and I was like, hey, I wasn't a student who was going to tutoring a lot, and it was, I was a little nervous and not sure what to expect. And all of a sudden I walked out of that session with a whole outline of my paper and what my philosophy argument was going to be. And so those moments, right, no matter if it's big and daunting, right, of, I'm really lost and confused about all of this, or if it's, hey, how do I study for this upcoming exam? We have amazing tutors, right? Super friendly K-State students who've taken those classes before, totally free for you, right? If we're going to talk about economics, it's a sunk cost because you pay your student fees. So you might as well use every service you can to its fullest. And again, we talked about it in studying, right? Using your tutor to teach. Overall, it never hurts for anybody to come to tutoring. When we look at kind of who comes, it's everybody. It's students who want to keep their A. It's students who have a C and want to get to a B. It's students who are totally lost, having never taken a class before and wanting to make sure they do well in it. And so tutoring is for everybody. I truly believe that. And then if you're one of those students who excel and you want to challenge yourself, tutoring is a great way of doing it. If you're considering going into vet school or med school, tutoring, those beginning classes help you stay prepared for that content when you go and take your MCAT or your LSAT or whichever exam it is. By staying in that content, you continue to keep that fresh in your brain.
Yeah, like we were just talking about how, reteaching subjects help you learn it better. Tutoring does that. And I love the notion of tutoring is for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. It definitely makes me want to access the Academic Achievement Center more. Is there, we talked mainly about tutoring today. Are there other resources that the Academic Achievement Center offers? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of the things you're talking about when it comes to studying are part of our success tool library. The different levels of questions you ask is often called Bloom's taxonomy, the levels of learning. So that's a tool on our website. The post-test analysis tool helps you walk through an exam after you've taken it. There's some ways of studying, right? There's mnemonic devices, there's flashcards, and then it's stepping those up. Okay, so not just looking at flashcards, it's then organizing them by those that you knew, those that you kind of knew, and those that you had no idea about, and focusing your time on those that you had no idea what you were talking about. Academic coaching is there for students to meet with a professional staff member. to really just understand college as a whole picture, right? We talked about that transition piece, the what do I do with my schedule? What do I do, right? Where do I go eat? How do I make friends? All of those pieces are what academic coaches are there to help students walk through. I heard it compared once to that favorite high school teacher you had, who you would go to for anything. That's kind of what an academic coach here is in college. It's someone that you can go to with any of those questions, with any of those concerns, and have a listening ear and then someone to point you in the right direction. They're not going to do the work for you, but they're going to help you come up with action items and goals to reach those. I tell students a lot, right? If we don't have a goal, we don't know what we're doing. And so we need to set some goals. And then if we fall a little short, like have grace, forgive yourself, and set a new goal, right? And I think that is what's most important. And that's what academic coaching is really about, is helping students identify the goal that they want. And then how do we reach it?
Absolutely. So for our listeners, if you are feeling like you need that high school teacher that you could go to for anything, please visit the Academic Achievement Center. Where is it located?
Yeah, so we're in Holton Hall 101, and then we're also in Hale Library on the second floor. So you can find us at ka-state.edu/AAC, or email us at achievement@ksu.edu.
Yeah. So if you find yourself experiencing academic stress, academic anxiety, if you have a problem with procrastination, or you're just kind of, trying to adjust to the huge schedule shift that is college, even if you've been in college for a while. This is my 4th semester of college, and I still am learning how to adapt to new circumstances and new schedules. I mean, your schedule changes every semester, sometimes in the middle of a semester, depending on the kinds of courses that you're taking. So reaching out for help it's essential. Or even, just reaching out in general. Maybe, like you said, maybe you're not in a situation where you're struggling, with an exam or a test, but you just are like, I don't really understand what's going on in this course, or I just want to solidify the kind of knowledge that I'm getting, or maybe it's a class that's really necessary for your major, and it's maybe a fundamentals of something. Talking to someone else in that major who's already taken that class is really beneficial. So thank you for coming on to this podcast today to talk about these things. I wanted to kind of record an episode about stress and anxiety, procrastination, because they're not necessarily taboo subjects. People talk about them all the time. It just can often feel like you're the only one experiencing them. It can be really isolating, and doing new things, especially like tutoring, if you've never gone to tutoring before, can be really intimidating, because there is also that anxiety of, what if I go in there and I'm like, they can't even help me? What if I'm too far away from even knowing what's going on, that they don't even know where to start with me? But there's nobody too far away, there's nobody that tutoring can't help. Even if it's, we may not be able to get you all the way to the end goal, but we can help you at least start walking that way. Absolutely. So I really, really appreciate you both for being guests today. Once again, here we have Luke Matulewicz, Assistant Director of the Academic Achievement Center, and Kailee Irvin. Resources for academic success mentioned in this podcast will be linked in the episode description. And as always, thank you guys for listening, and please be sure to tune in for our next episode of WellCAT 101. Thank you.